simple song the Lord gave me. It says, more of your power, more of your spirit, more of your presence. I need more. More of your power. More of your spirit. Oh, more of your presence. I need more. Help me sing of you. We cry to God. We need more. Yes, Jesus. Your presence. I need. It's a very simple song. More of, again, more. Yes, Jesus. Yes, Jesus. I need more. Sing that with us again. Say, wherever you may be in your life, we find ourselves saying, God, we need more of your spirit. We need more. Yes, Jesus. I need more. Yes, Jesus. Yes. God's power within us is more than anything in this world. But the word declares, greater is he that is within us than he that is in the world. So God, we cry that we need more of you within us. That's the only way that we know that we can make it. We realize that we've got to have more. Help me sing once again. More of your power. That's all the words we have. Oh, yes, Jesus. Your spirit, yes, Jesus. Just give God a worship right now, right where you are. We need more. We need more. More healing. More healing in our bodies, in this world. Yes, Jesus. Yes, Jesus. Yes, Jesus.
Good evening, everyone. Whoa, good evening, everyone. We are so excited that you guys are here this afternoon for this very special event that I think is really timely and appropriate for the state that our nation finds itself in. And I am, as some of you may know, Pastor Rebecca Davis, associate pastor, one of the associate pastors here at Berean. And I just want to welcome everybody out on behalf of our senior pastor, Frederick Russell. And before we get started, we're going to have a word of prayer. If you guys would, just stand to your feet with me, and we're going to pray. Let's pray. God, we believe that for such a time as this discussion, what's going to happen tonight is very necessary. And we are asking for the power of your Spirit to be here, be with the panelists and the special guests, to be with those who are in the audience. And we're just asking, again, that your Spirit will lead, give wisdom and discernment and understanding, and touch us all in a way that will motivate us and put a fire in us to really bring about change here in this nation. Again, we're just praying for all race relations and different things across the nation, Father, even now as we speak. And so we're just thanking you for what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. We bless you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You may be seated. And now I just want to bring Chairman Eves to the say a few special words.
Thank you so much, Pastor Davis. Good afternoon, everybody. It certainly is my honor and pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the historic Berean Seventh-day Adventist Church for hosting this very important forum. As Pastor Davis pointed out, it is timely, but it is also well needed. I was reminded, as I was driving here, of the words of Marvin Gaye, who sang a song back in the 1960s, I believe. I'm not going to sing it for you, but the words basically go, mother, 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 there are too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there are too many of you dying. We've got to find a way to bring loving here today. And we all see the size of the issue. You have black boys, black men who in some cases are just minding their own business and being subjected to brutality and becoming a statistic. Black lives matter. Don't black lives matter? But you also see the other side. For me as chairman of Fulton County, I work with many communities in the city of Atlanta and South Fulton and other parts beyond, and there certainly are times and examples when our communities are being challenged by a criminal element. We dial 911 and there's a problem in our communities, we want the police to show up. And police put their lives on the line all the time. In fact, about a month ago, a police officer was ambushed in South Fulton County and killed. So police lives matter as well. And so what are we going to do in terms of arming our young men with information on what happens when they encounter police? And so the Berean Church, Isaiah, my friend Isaiah, and others have put on this forum. We want to arm our parents and stakeholders with information because we want to support our children. So it is certainly my pleasure and honor again to welcome you, bring greetings, and give thanks to this wonderful church for hosting this very important forum. Pastor Davis, I'm not sure I'm supposed to introduce the guests or what? Okay. Well, I had a chance to meet some distinguished people in the back room, but I don't remember everybody's name. Won't you all come forward, please, as you, and I guess during the panel you will introduce yourselves. Okay. Let's give them a round of applause.
My name is Joe Kendrick. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, just trying to do something to see if we can help our young people.
Good afternoon. My name is James Hudson, and I am with Kendrick and a program called Community Step Up.
My name is Vince Williams. I'm the mayor of Union City, Georgia.
My name is Kenneth Lively. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and I'm here to get you registered to vote.
At this time, we have a very special
The police are able to use the press to make the white public think that 90% or 99% of the Negroes in the Negro community are criminals. And once the white public is convinced that most of the Negro community is a criminal element, then this automatically paves the way for the police to move into the Negro community, exercising Gestapo tactics, stopping any black man who is on the sidewalk, whether he is guilty or whether he is innocent, whether he is well-dressed or whether he is poor, whether he is educated or whether he is dumb, whether he's a Christian or whether he is dumb. As long as he is black and a member of the Negro community, the white public thinks that the white policeman is justified in going in there and trampling on that man's civil rights and on that man's human rights.
Now I want you to look at what is going on in Ferguson, Missouri, in downtown America, okay? These are armed police with not machine guns, with semi-automatic rifles, batons, with shields, many of them dressed for combat. Now why they're doing this, I don't know. Because there is no threat going on here, none, that merits this. There is none, okay? Absolutely there have been looters, absolutely over the last 9 days there's been violence, but there is nothing going on this street right now that merits this scene out of Bagram.
I think there's any real organization to the riots. I think they grow out of the conditions that I've mentioned all along. And as long as these intolerable conditions are there, as long as the Negro finds himself living every day in a major depression, then every city will sit on a powder keg and can explode over the slightest incident. I feel that killing is a tragic way to deal with any social problem. There is no violent solution to the problem that the Negro confronts in this country. And this is why I have constantly said that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. After all, the Negro ends up on the losing end. We can't win a violent revolution. Most killed in riots, the Negroes themselves. The persons who end up not being able to get milk for their children of Negroes because things where they have to live are destroyed. So there's no practical or moral answer in the realm of violence to the Negro's problem.
The incident caught on camera showing a 20-year-old University of Virginia junior on the ground, his face bloody, and the school is angry. ABC's Lindsay Davis is here with that story. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Robin. Right away, the university's president asked Virginia's governor for an independent investigation into the incident, emailing the campus community saying she had deep concern about it. And now the governor is investigating the use of force in Martise Johnson's arrest, which you can see the end result caught on cell phone video.
His head is bleeding.
Morning surrounding the now viral video of this arrest of 20-year-old Martise Johnson, a black male student at the University of Virginia.
I go to UVA.
The college junior wrestled to the ground by alcoholic beverage control agents early Wednesday morning after to a bar near UVA's campus.
How did this happen, you racist?
His blood splattered on the pavement. Witnesses say police acted with unnecessary force and that he hit his head on the ground, reportedly requiring 10 stitches. Johnson was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice without force and public swearing or intoxication.
Martise was not safe.
Overnight, thousands of students gathering at a rally on campus in support of Johnson, who's a member of the school's honor committee.
He's a good friend, and I was very upset about what happened. I wanted to see what the school was going to say about it, and also just to show love and support.
Johnson, emotional, wiping away tears. His lawyer telling ABC News, Martise is a smart young man with a bright future. He is absolutely devastated by yesterday's events. We're preparing to investigate and defend this matter vigorously. The university's president echoing that sentiment at the rally last night.
My heart went out to him. I thought how I would feel if I were his mother.
This video, yet another example of racial tensions between civilians and authorities. At one point, someone in the background chanting, "Hands up." Part of the "Hands up, don't shoot" mantra recited following the shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri last summer. Johnson pictured here with his hands up in a demonstration after the unarmed teen's death.
Johnson was released from jail Wednesday morning. An email from one student organization signed as Concerned Black Students said the arrest was unprovoked and Johnson was not resisting questioning or arrest. Jordan.
This ain't no new situation. It's just overboard. This been going on for years.
And they're tear gassing, the people that are supporting the cause, but why didn't they tear gas him? At least he still would have been alive. You know what I'm saying? You had to shoot and kill him, after he surrendered? No, that's not a robbery. That's murder.
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Its purpose is national, not regional. Its purpose is to promote a more abiding commitment to freedom, a more constant pursuit of justice, and a deeper respect for human dignity. Let us close the springs of racial poison. Let us pray for wise and understanding hearts. Let us lay aside irrelevant differences and make our nation whole. Let us hasten that day when our unmeasured strength and our spirit will be free to do the great works ordained for this nation by the just and wise God, who is the Father of us all. Thank you and good night.
I was there for the buses in Montgomery, the hoses in Birmingham, a bridge in Selma, and a preacher from Atlanta who told the people that we shall overcome. Yes, we can.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elder Isaiah Delamar. I want to welcome you out to the Berean Church, and thank you for coming out. I recognize that you had many choices, but that you came to participate and hear from our panelists regarding an issue that is facing our nation with young black men being gunned down by the police. And it was my hope that God put upon my heart to come up with some constructive solutions to the issues that we are facing right now. Point number one that I want to make is that for our young men, we ought to respect authority, no matter what the circumstances, no matter how we may be agitated with the police. Ultimately, they have the lawful authority in a violent confrontation to take your life, So I want you to always keep that in mind, that you have control over your emotions, and we'll have a panelist who will be addressing those issues. Number two, that I felt moved and compelled, is that we as a people have to be involved and engaged in the political process. What you saw in Ferguson, when you have a majority minority being ruled by a majority that is not necessarily, that look like their best interests at heart, the simple remedy is to be involved and engaged, to vote. You can have control of the DA. So who we vote for, attorney general, district attorney, governor, it matters. The next is educate yourself on what your constitutional rights, and that's what we're going to do here today. And then lastly, it is, how do we engage our police in a constructive dialogue? How do we change the police tactics that we believe are against us? And it is my prayer and my hope that this panel discussion will address those vital issues. So my two takeaways for you right from the start is how we change this situation is, one, to educate ourselves, and then two, to motivate you all to be engaged in the process. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my esteemed panelists here, and I will ask them to start with three major takeaways. And the format is I will recognize you, whatever questions you may have, engage the panelists, and we will have a breakout session with about 30 or 45 minutes, where you can engage in a more personal way if you don't feel comfortable asking questions to our panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to talk to Dr. Terry Parks. Introduce yourself, and how do you fit into this discussion?
Okay, my name is Dr. Terry Parks. I am a counseling psychologist, and I run a, can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Okay. Dr. Terry Parks, and I am a counseling psychologist. I run a state-certified program for domestic violence, anger management, alcohol and drug parenting, sexual predators, and the list goes on. A takeaway that... Three takeaways is I'm on this panel to discuss emotion regulation. I'm going to try to make it fit, but what I would want you to take away is, what anger is, what painful emotions are, how to regulate those, and how to recognize when you're becoming upset.
Next, this is Austell City Councilman Ali Clemens.
Thank you. Yes, I am on the City Council in the City of Austell. As having been in this position for a little over a year now, and then with the state of the country, it is very apparent to me, and as it should be to each one of you, that it is paramount for us to become a part of the political process. I realize that you can be in a situation such as Ferguson, and you would have the majority situation ruling there, when actually you should be able to control that. And what I would like for the young people to understand and realize is that if you continue to allow those types of situations to control you or control your surroundings, that you lose control. You can have more control than you think, and it's all a part of being a part of it. Nextly, I would think that, as I understand and I know that young people, they have voter apathy. They really don't feel a part of it. They may not see anybody that they want to vote in, and they may just think that that's something that their parents should do. But you need to have a buy-in on that. Right now, it seems almost like to you that there's an open season on you, and you've got to know how to respond. But you also need to know that you can make a difference if you become a part of that process and vote. There are ways to make a difference by being a part of that process and register to vote and vote for people that you feel are going to serve you and the needs that you have. And lastly, I would like to believe also that as being a part of the legislative process myself, that I too should be looking at how things are being done as far as within our city and other cities around me that affect the livelihood of all of us, young and old, black and white alike.
Thank you. And now, Assistant District Attorney Dahlia Racy.
Good afternoon. I am Deputy Chief Assistant District Attorney of the Human Trafficking Unit in DeKalb County District Attorney's Office. I have been a prosecutor for well over a decade, and during that time have been responsible for handling pretty much everything under the sun. Unfortunately, I have had to work up cases of some of the most horrendous acts that humans commit on each other. My takeaways, I don't know if I have three, but I'll try. My takeaways for this process is I'm also third generation law enforcement. My grandfather was in the FBI, my father is a retired officer, and I am a prosecutor. So what I would say is for us to be careful to not fall into the trap of what we are accusing others of doing to us. What I mean is a lot of times we feel that all officers are out to get us. And I have prosecuted officers that have done wrong. But I think in the same token, by us lumping all officers into one category, we're doing the same thing that we're accusing them of doing. We need to be sure that we are able to distinguish apples out of the field and know that the vast majority of officers are upholding their duty to serve and to protect. And that when it goes down, you want to know that you're able to trust and call on your law enforcement. And that starts by having and building relationships with them. And then finally, I know it's been said pretty much by every other panelist, but being a former candidate who lost my race by 450 votes, the disengagement that we have in this process, when it clicks in our minds that all the protests that happen in Ferguson, all the protests that happen in Virginia Tech, without the power of the vote behind that, it has zero impact. Because all you're doing is making noise. When you make a difference is when you show up in that booth and you make your voice heard by showing your elected officials that you will hold them accountable to the standards that you believe should be held to.
Thank you. And Attorney Willie Davis, you have a unique perspective, and I want you to talk about your dual role.
Well, in my role, I represent people that are accused of committing crimes, and I've been doing that for the last 19 years. And when I say represent people, I mean murder, rape, drug possession, burglary, armed robberies, everything that you can think bad. Or I'm still in the process of representing those type people. And when I'm going to say the three takeaways, one would be that most of the times that people don't understand their rights. When you hear on television that you have a right to remain silent, anything you say can and will be used against you, that's not a slogan. That's for real. The other part of that is that most of the people, I would probably say almost 60 or 70% people that I represent probably fall somewhere between 19 and 25 years old, black males. That there's a correlation that most of them don't have an education beyond the 9th or 10th grade. The third thing I would say that a lot of instances that parents don't seem to care attention to what their boys are doing. They don't know who they're hanging with. They don't know who their friends are. A lot of the people that I have may be good kids, but you're hanging around the wrong people, and when the arrest is made, you're just as guilty as. And when things happen, then we see on TV the parents complaining, "Well, my child was this and my child was that," when in reality, there were signs and you didn't pay attention to it. So we can talk about that later.
All right, thank you. And my good friend Joy Walker, unique perspectives as well, multiple roles.
Good evening. My name is Joy Walker, and I too am an attorney. And I've seen the criminal justice profession, the role justice, from two different roles. I've seen it as a criminal defense attorney like Willie Davis, and in a perspective as a judge. And my three takeaways: one, if you are in a even a minor criminal case, misdemeanor traffic, petty theft, anything like that, if you cannot afford an attorney, when the judge asks whether or not you want a public defender, say yes. And if you can afford an attorney, don't think that you can defend yourself without one. The justice system is geared for people that understand the laws, know how they apply, and know how to navigate them. So although I'm not in private practice, so it's not a plug for my practice, if you cannot afford an attorney, ask the court for a public defender, and if you can afford an attorney, bring it to court. Because what I see that lay people, that's what we call people without degrees, what they tend to do is talk themselves into their guilty. Second, if you are a parent with a child that's in the juvenile justice system, it matters that you come to court. It matters that you dress your child appropriately when you come to court, and it matters whether or not you have representation. A person that's sitting in a position of judge in that matter takes a look at the whole situation when making recommendations of how the future of your child's life is going to be. So if your child comes with sagging pants, no tie, and slumped over like they are bored to death at a process that they're involved in, the odds that the judge is going to act favorable towards them or to a person that doesn't really care what's happening is not really good. Last but certainly not least, as Willie said about your right to remain silent, 9 times out of 10 when you have simple traffic stops, the reason why you're convicted of your case, beyond the fact that most people don't know how to cross-examine a police officer, is that you've made statements trying to talk yourself out of the ticket or whatever, that the officer then writes on his copy of the traffic violation, and that he then remembers who you are. If you give out 400 tickets between the time he gave you yours and the 400th, he's going to remember you because he wrote everything you said on a piece of paper that he's looking at in court, and so he's going to be more credible than you are. So if you get pulled over for a simple traffic violation, please be quiet.
Thank you. And last but certainly not, Quiller.
Good evening. My name is Major Timothy Quiller, and I'm employed with the Civil Line of Police, and I'm assigned to Zone 1 Precinct, which means that I'm the commander of 160 police officers that respond to 911 services within the Northwest community, the community that we sit in right now. I've been employed about 26 years, and out of those 26 years, the majority of my time has been spent in the community, dealing with community issues, community engagement, and building partnerships. For the last 4 years as zone commander, I've built those partnerships with my communities, had tremendous responses. I respond to all emergency situations where I know the community is going to be involved and want to know what is going to happen. As far as the takeaways, the first takeaway I would say is know your rights. Young folks, know your rights. What the police can and cannot do. That's the most important. The second thing is engagement. And when I mean community engagement, that you have to get involved. You have to get involved in your community as far as schools, your faith-based organizations, your business organizations. And the last thing is open dialogue and communication. And that's communication with your officials as well as your police. A lot of times that when we arrive on the scene, we don't communicate well. We're not able to tell actually what happened. And what happens is this: a lot of times that when there's not positive communication, something will go wrong. But there's another takeaway: emotions. We have to learn how to control our emotions when you're approached by a police. We want every police encounter to be positive. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to have my special guest just quickly talk about their their points in this particular issue, and Chairman Eves is working on a very special initiative all the way up from the White House.
Thank you, Isaiah. First of all, I think you got a great panel here, and I think they've laid out a lot of good issues and points and perspectives. I want to make 2 points. One of them is political engagement. As several of the panelists pointed out, it's incredibly important for citizens to be involved in the political process, putting the right people in place, because you put the right people in place, they put priorities in place that are in line with your priorities. So you heard a lot about criminal justice. So here in Fulton County, 6 years ago, 48,000 people went through our jail. 48,000 people went through our jail, cost $120 million a year. 90% African American males. Ms. Davis pointed out about education, 80% of them are high school dropouts. 48,000 went through our jail right here in Fulton County. As a result of leadership, engagement, and others, we're beginning to move from a punitive model of criminal justice to a rehabilitative model, diversion model of criminal justice. So now, this past year, only about 30,000 people went through our jail. So a major reduction, because we are putting folks into treatment in the community instead of them languishing in jail and not doing anything. So it's important for political leaders to be aligned with your priorities to have better outcomes. And as a result of that, Isaiah, crime is actually going down because of some of the efforts we're doing on the criminal justice side. The other thing that we're doing is President Obama announced last year an initiative called My Brother's Keeper. It's targeted towards boys of color because, among others, the high representation or proportionality of boys of color, specifically African American males, in the criminal justice system. And so he is, through his administration, asking local governments to get engaged. So one, we're dealing with criminal justice reform, but we're also looking at this issue of education. Again, as Mr. Davis pointed out, there's a parallel between, or correlation between high school dropouts and those who end up in the criminal justice system. Through My Brother's Keeper initiative, we're going to be partnering with the school system, Fulton County and the Atlanta school system, because right now in the Atlanta public school system, about 50% of the kids drop out. And so Fulton County is going to be working with them to try to have after-school programs to make sure our young men stay in school. And so that's one of the things that we're doing. And then number 2, we're actually compiling a community resource booklet for parents who have sons who don't know what their sons can do during the summers or during the school year. I have a son who's now a sophomore at Morehouse College. We want to provide information in the hands of parents of what creative and substantive things that you can do for your son to put them on a path of positive activity in the community and in the city. And so that's My Brother's Keeper, among other things that we're doing in Fulton County.
Thank you, Chairman Eves. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Kendrick. This is our first time actually meeting. And when God put this on my heart, I reached out to all my contacts nationwide, and God led me to this man. Listen to what he has to say. He's right on point.
Hello, everybody. I'm a veterinarian by training, a frustrated school teacher standing in front of you, and a person who knows that God has put it on my heart to do something about the recidivism of people going back and forth through prison. So we've started an organization in Knoxville, Tennessee called Community Step Up. And when we first started it, we didn't know what we were doing. The first thing we did was, and I'm going to be brief, was to find out that there were so many people in our area who purported to do the same thing that we wanted. There are so many scores of organizations already in your community who already say that they're doing something about it. But guess what? There's a disconnect between the people who need the help and the organizations who purport. So what Community Step Up has done is this. I've organized all the people in Knoxville who have housing, who say they can help with drugs, who say they can help with reducing fines and record expungements and in finding jobs. Seminar last year with all of these different groups under one roof. And guess what? We had all of the ex-felons present too. So what our organization has done, and I'm advised any of you who are listening to this, when we get downstairs, I have an outline of how we set this program up and what's to be done, and I brought copies if anybody wants them. One group is not going to solve this problem. You have to marshal the efforts of many different diverse groups if you're ever going to solve this problem at all. And what we are now, we are a broker. When people get out of prison, we have got the district attorney to let us know when their records are up. We get them a questionnaire. They tell us all about what their needs are. We meet them at the prison gate, and we hand deliver them to the people who need help. When they first get out of jail, all they want is to go back where they came. So if you don't hand deliver these people to the place that need help, you're wasting your time. I call us. We don't want a lot of publicity. We have TV shows in Knoxville who are trying to get us on TV because they heard about what we do. We've declined. We want organization grassroots. You can't build a skyscraper by starting on the 3rd floor. You have to have a bedrock for your foundation, and that's what we are doing. I'm going to quit now. My wife is generally in the audience when I get lost in the exuberance of my own verbosity, and she rings a bell to sit me down, so I'm going to sit down since she's not here.
All right, and I also Union City Mayor Williams, who's working on some great issues right here locally.
Well, good afternoon to you. As my friend Isaiah stated, I am the mayor of Union City, but I am also an associate minister with Higher Living Christian Church. Through that opportunity, through the church, I work with a lot of prisons, and we have created a program within our Community Impact Center where we provide counseling that deals with anger management or anger resolution, as we call it, because you can't manage anger. You have to learn how to resolve that. You know, many of us that are sitting here right now, we have issues that, can anger us. It's okay to be angry, but it's what you do with that anger. The Bible tells you, it's okay to be angry. God is angered at times. So we have to realize there is a way that we need to handle that and utilize the opportunity to expound on turning that anger into something positive. But what I want to share with you, early last year, around this time last year, I was appointed by Governor Nathan Deal to a board that is called the County Municipal Probation Advisory Council. I found out that I was the first African-American male ever appointed to that body. Many of us in here sitting right now have either gone through probation, or we know someone who is involved in the probationary field right now who is waiting to get off of probation. But what we need to understand with probation, a lot of the organizations that charge us the fees and fines, they have been taking advantage of many of us in our communities. So what I do is make sure that I provide a level of opportunity to make sure that we are not mistreated in that process. I have been somewhat well received. A lot of the organizations that own those probation venues, they have been very deliberate to let me know that they've never heard someone speak up in regards to some of the things that they've been doing for well over 20 years. If you have a probationer, 9 times out of 10, he doesn't or she doesn't have a job. So why are you still charging excessive fees and fines that you know they can't pay? And then they have to turn right back around and go in front of a judge for failure to comply with whatever the probation department has shared with them. And then they have another probation fee or fine or an extension on their probation term. What I would like to say also, all of the panelists have shared some great information, but we as parents, there are things we've got to do. Many of us, we know if our son or daughter comes in the home and they've got on these brand new Nikes, you know you're struggling every day working, and you know that they're not working. The signs are in front of us. We always find a way to try to blame everybody else, but let's look in the mirror. What are we doing to help our children do better? Many of us in here right now, we're talking about voters' participation. Our young people that are in here right now, 17 years old and up, because you can register to vote at the age of 17 if you're going to be 18 by the next election. How many of you in here right now are approaching voter age and you're not registered? Just raise your hands, don't be afraid, because there's someone here today to make sure that you will be registered. Because if you get involved in the voting process, you can make a difference, but also you can make sure that your future is brighter, and the future is brighter for those that come behind you. Thank you.
Thank you. And then lastly, Brother Lively, Kenneth Lively, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Good afternoon once again, everyone. As I stated earlier, my name is Kenneth Lively. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, but my day job, or actually my night job, because I'm a police officer at Clark Atlanta University. And so I approach this subject from many different levels. Now, I'm a police officer, but I've also been a victim of police brutality when I was 17 years old. I've also had 2 people in my family, well, my god brother and my cousin, killed by members of our community. So, same zeal and how upset we get when somebody from another community kills somebody in our community, we need to have that same anger and channel it into a positive way to change what's going on in our community. Because I'm really tired of hearing about our young men getting killed by somebody in our community and nobody speaking up for the victims in that case. It's really tiring. As everyone has said earlier, in Ferguson, Missouri, majority black town, no black elected officials. That's a problem. They have a high number of people. I had some students tell me that they went to Ferguson to register people to vote. They registered in 4 days 105 people. No, 3 days, I'm sorry, 105 people, which is extraordinary. But how many of those people are going to vote? Because it's not only thing that being a registered voter is going to do for you, which is it's very important as well. You can be on a grand jury or jury. That's important as well. But if you don't vote, then you just wasted paper and time. We don't have time to waste time or paper. So I urge all of you, register to vote, go out and vote. You have some elected officials in here that's taking their free time, as well as Major Quiller coming out here to tell you what you can do to save people in our community. But you have to do it. We can't do it for you. You have to do it. So please, if you're not registered to vote, I have paper registration forms that you can do that. And if I'm not mistaken, there's also a way you can do it on the computer. We'll take care of the process right here for you. It'll take 5 minutes out of your life, and we will greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now open up for questions, and if you can go to the mics.
Thank you, panelists. I have a couple of questions. I want to thank everyone who spoke. A question for the Deputy Chief Assistant DA, a question for the Major. My name is June. I'm a member of Berean. I recently learned through a television news program that DeKalb County has announced diversity training for their officers. I'd like to get your opinion, Assistant DA, on whether or not diversity training could be a help for police officers to understand how to approach diversity people when they pull them over? And in broad-based terms, could this be sort of a platform or a test case for other counties? For the major, does a police officer need to see a weapon for whomever they may pull over, or if they're in a situation to have the right to fire upon someone? And then thirdly, for anyone who's spoken today in the panel, can you please clarify for all of our folks who came out tonight the election that is the most important to be a part of? Everyone knows about the major main election. It's the election that happens in between for within our local counties that I think that people aren't aware of that are most important to vote for. I was actually participating in one of those off elections, if you will, most important election, and didn't see a lot of people turn out for it. Thank you.
Great questions. First, regarding the diversity training, I think, I don't think diversity training can ever hurt, but I think that at some point you have to set aside the theory and have the practical experience and have the experience of being entrenched in another person's community. DeKalb County Police Department is very diverse, more diverse I think probably than most. And a lot of the officers that are members of DeKalb County, DKPD, are actually homegrown. Grew up in DeKalb, wanted to see their community improve, wanted to be there to help their community, and so they became officers and served where they grew up in school. I think something though that is also equally important is now the mental health training that's starting. What a lot of times officers are confronted with, and I'll let the major speak to it more than I do, but a lot of times officers are confronted with situations that they have to make split-second decisions regarding. And a lot of times we have those situations. Everybody cares about their family, right? You know, just as the suspect has people that care for him, so does the officer. And I could be the daughter of an officer. There was not one day that I wondered or did not wonder if my dad would come home. So you have to put into the perspective that when they're out there, they're risking their lives every time they get that call. And so there is certain mind frame that comes in to survive, if you will. But I think what's really important now is that mental health training, because a majority of the situations that do have lethal force involved, there was some component of mental illness going on with that individual. And so that is something that is starting that I think will be instrumental in improving relations and improving situational awareness.
As far as weapons in cars, one of the things that you want to consider, and this is everybody, you have the right, individuals who have the right to possess a weapon can have a weapon in their car. As far as giving the okay for someone or an officer that approaches a car to shoot someone because they have a weapon, that cannot occur. Let me tell you the deal on that. When an officer approaches a car and he sees a weapon, the first thing he wants to do is make sure that scene is safe. If he approaches that car and there is a threat, say for instance that person raises his weapon and that officer gives commands to put that weapon down, and that weapon is pointed at an officer, then that officer uses lethal measures. But just possessing that car, that does not give an officer the right to shoot inside that vehicle. There has to be other situations. There has to be a threat to that officer or another officer or a citizen before he can use lethal force.
And to add to that just briefly, if there is some other criminal act going on, whether or not they're using that weapon during that act, if they simply possess the weapon, it's not being shown, it just happens to be somewhere on their body, that's enhanced penalties. So anytime that you have the desire to carry a weapon, there are added responsibilities then consequently. So if you're caught up in some mess, I can't remember who was referring to that, if it was Joy or not, but party to a crime. So let's say you are, by law, allowed to carry a weapon. You have a carry and conceal weapon license. and you're around some people that are doing something that they shouldn't do. When you get scooped up in that kind of fell swoop that's going on, you're going to face even more charges than anybody else because you had a weapon on you as well.
The most important election, to answer, I need one of you all to address that.
I want to answer this question. Great question. All elections are important. All elections are important. Presidential, federal, state, and local. But the elections that have the greatest impact on your day-to-day life, what do you think? Local. So county, we are elected every 4 years, city government every 4 years, school boards every 4 years. Those that have the greatest impact. Fulton County has 950,000 people, 300,000 registered to vote. Presidential election, 60 vote, we're happy. Local election, 30%, 40%, we're happy. Had a bond referendum in the city of Atlanta last week. It's embarrassing how many people voted for a $250 million bond referendum. All those local elections affect your day-to-day life. We decide whether there's a health clinic in your neighborhood. We decide what happens at Douglas High School right over here. We decide on a health clinic. We decide on a variety of things that impact your lives, but the local elections, those are the ones that have the least amount of participation.
Sure.
If a police officer feels threatened, let's say it's a pullover, the person is, as we all do, reaching for our driver's license and our insurance. If an officer is approaching someone and they're reaching, or if there is a crime in place, he doesn't see a weapon and the person is reaching for something, do they then have a right to consider it a threat and discharge their weapon?
Let me say this. As far as an officer, when an officer approaches a car, he's just like anybody else. Officer has a fear there. There's a fear factor. There's emotions running. He doesn't know what actually that person is doing inside that vehicle. If an officer approaches a vehicle, and the first thing he's going to do is give instructions, and this is for the young folks. He's going to give instructions on what he wants you to do. I would advise you, if an officer approaches your car and he gives you instructions, ma'am, sir, can you remain in your car? That's going to be the first thing he's going to say to you. The second thing, he's going to either ask you, could you please place your hands, if he feels threatened, he's going to ask you to please place your hands on the steering wheel. And that person needs to follow those instructions. There's a lot of times, and even in my experience, when I pulled over vehicles, there's several people, and they're doing several different things. They're trying to discard drugs, they're trying to hide a weapon, so forth and so on. But we try to control that situation. And that's by bringing other people to the scene, and then with the assistance of those others, we'll try to remove those occupants from that vehicle. But just because he's reaching for something doesn't mean that you can shoot a person. And just because he's reaching, because we all know this. We all know that individuals get nervous when they're pulled over by police and they do crazy things. Some will reach underneath the seat. Some will make a gesture. Some will even say things. But that doesn't get an officer the right to pull his weapon and discharge it. But what that officer has to do is be patient. He has to actually see what he has in front of him and make a determination if he's going to use lethal force or not. So with the officer's training and experience, you'll find out they're able to maneuver around those situations and handle those situations properly. But just by somebody making a reach for something doesn't mean that officer can pull his weapon and shoot you. So I think that with the training and experience, I think the officers do a pretty good job at that, of controlling those types of situations.
All right, and for those who are watching us through live screen, we have a hashtag if you have any questions, and that is, hold on, I'm gonna ask Fred.
It's Rights Matter ATL, hashtag Rights Matter ATL.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to the panelists for coming here to talk to us this evening. I have a question that I think possibly anyone on the panel could address, but specifically the counselor and Major, if you could address this. This is regarding how to de-escalate a situation. We've seen in the news instances where a situation escalated to the point where a death occurs when everyone knows that that death could have been prevented. That comes to mind was the situation in South Carolina, I believe it was, where a gentleman was complying with the instructions from the police officer and he got shot anyway. Mother and an aunt of two teenage boys, we get concerned. Your children are walking on the street, they're walking home, they haven't done anything, they get approached. First of all, how do you, the anger situation, how do you control your emotions? When you're angry because you know you've been targeted, you've done nothing wrong. It's a human emotion, you're going to get angry or upset about it. So how can our youngsters learn to control that emotion? And how do you de-escalate a situation where a police officer is escalating, well, in our perception, a police officer escalates something that should not have been escalated in the first place, and you're complying with the police officer's request, and you get hurt anyway?
One of the things we have to look at when we're engaging police officers is this. There has to be a mutual respect. There has to be some type of communication between that person, which is, you say your son or your relative. There has to be some type of educational process there in how to deal with police officers, how to engage police officers. And one of the things I would recommend is this. When you're at home and you're talking to your kid and you're trying to get him to comply, use those same things in explaining to him how to deal with police officers. When you want him to clean his room, what do? You say, Johnny, I need you to go in and clean your room. If you don't clean your room, there's going to be a penalty for that. So you have to use almost the same logic when you're dealing with police officers. I would advise everybody, if you engage a police officer, contact with a police officer, make sure that you answer the questions that he is asking you. Make sure you don't use any threatening gestures. Make sure you're not saying that I'm going to hurt you, anything like that. And just make sure that you're obeying the law. That's the first thing, is just to obey the law. But going back to your question about, say for instance, if you're complying, but you end up getting injured. Now, I would say on a daily basis, as far as complaints, we usually don't get complaints where people are injured after complying. We don't. We usually get the complaints, what they did prior to. You know, we use this thing called escalating force or de-escalating force when we're engaging combatants. And so we're only able to use the force necessary to effect that arrest. We can't go beyond that. So say for instance, if we're engaged in the combat in a force, then what we have to do is this. We can only use the step up. So say for instance, if you're just running, then we'll run and we'll be able to take hold of you. If you're punching at us, then we can use our less lethal force options. We could tase you, or we can use our ass batons, or we can use pepper spray. But we can't go beyond that, and that's what we train our officers not to do, is go beyond that. But if you do have a situation where, say for instance, that you, after complying, then I would say record that immediately. You can call a supervisor, or you can contact Internal Affairs and report that.
Great. Dr. Parks.
I'm sorry, I'm on mic patrol here. Excuse me. Okay, the question was how do you regulate your emotions? How do you?
Yes.
Okay, that is I'm gonna try to sum it up without taking a lot of time. I think first of all, what you have to realize is, you have to realize what your goal is. Okay, what are you trying to get accomplished? When the police officer pulls you over, I think the goal for both people is to make it home, to make it out of there. A lot of folks are already angry and upset because they're being pulled over, okay? So, how do you regulate that? How do you deal with these emotions? How do you change those? First of all, what we gotta understand is that emotions do three things. Number one, they communicate to us that something is going on. They also communicate to and influence others. So if the police pull me over and my emotions are not where he wants them to be, then there's a great likelihood that something may happen. They also prepare us for action. That's what emotions do, painful emotions. So why is it important that we deal with these painful emotions? Number one, pain is a part of life. It can't always be avoided. Number two, if you don't deal with your pain effectively, you may act impulsively. Three, if you act impulsively, you may end up hurting yourself, someone else, and not getting your goal met. Remember what I said earlier, your goal is to try to get home. So compliance is what you want to try to do in a situation like that. Does that, or?
All right, thank you.
No? Yes.
And so also I want to encourage the young people in our audience to be asking questions, and then just for the sake of time, if you can keep your questions really short, and also for our panelists, very concise with your answers, so we get as many people as possible in the public forum, and then we'll have the private breakout.
Good evening. My name is Michael, a member here at Berean, and again, I'd like to thank all the panelists for spending this time with us this evening. Very simple question, but I think it's very important to know our rights in these situations. I know that a search warrant is needed to come into your home. Okay, I think that's my understanding. But a lot of times I'm traveling alongside the highway and I see a lot of people's automobiles being searched. Is a search warrant needed on those regards? I've done some research and I've seen that all is needed is probable cause. I don't know how definitive that is, but can you shed some light on is a search warrant needed when we're pulled over on the side of the road and the officer just wants to invade our personal space, which is our automobile? And also maybe could you shed some light on the various or numerous situations where a search warrant is needed for an officer to invade that personal space of yours? Thank you.
It depends. So let's say you're pulled over on the side of the road, and what you said, you need probable cause at that point. So for example, if the officer pulls you over, there's a scent of marijuana in the car, we call in the dogs. If they alert, you have the probable cause, you could go through the car. Similarly, if there is the butt of a gun is exposed in a vehicle, something along those lines. Now you can have a right to carry, but if it's a situation where there's no permit, or a situation where it may be fruits of a crime, different circumstances. I'm giving a very brief version of this. So it just depends on the situation. Now, if the crime has already occurred and the car is collected as part of the evidence of that crime, what typically will happen is a car gets towed to an impound lot. Officers will go get a search warrant, and then they'll have a thorough search of that vehicle. For the house, same thing. If there's probable that a crime occurred, for example, if a confidential informant says that they're selling drugs out of that house, an undercover officer completes a buy at that house, that's enough to get a search warrant. And so it just depends on the situation, the facts and circumstances. There's also emergency situations. So for example, if there is a child that has gone missing, and there's information that that child was taken into such and such house, then there are certain exceptions to the search warrant rule, because obviously for the care of that and safety of that child, they need immediate entry to make sure that the child is okay if they are in fact in that house. So there's a lot of varied situations, and the case law, I mean, it could be one little factual difference that would say whether or not it's okay or it's not okay, which is why, well, like Joy Walker said, if you are involved in a criminal matter, get a lawyer, because there are those small nuances.
And let me say, because a lot of times when I have a client, one of the first one or two things that they say is, they didn't have a search warrant and they didn't read me my rights. And it's just like she's saying, it depends on the circumstances. All circumstances that you're driving or at home does not mean that you have to get a search warrant. Every time an officer talks to you and want to have a conversation does not mean that you're under arrest for the purpose of you have the right to remain silent or anything like that. If you don't want to answer something, you don't think you've done anything illegal, then sometimes, like, officer, I really don't want to talk. But if you're in the process of You know, the biggest thing that most of the people that I get when there's a car thing, you're smoking, the car, as soon as the officer get there, it's a smell of alcohol. You look in the car, you see a weapon. You're in the car, somebody got a smart mouth. Why are you stopping us in such and such? Oh, now, just like Terry said, you've created a situation that what you hiding. So a lot of times it really depends on the situation. But I think the main thing is that you need to know your rights. And most of the times when they ask that question, search warrant, in every instance, they had something illegal that was found. It's never a situation where they search and they didn't find anything. It's always something illegal was found. And when we go to court and you like have a motion to suppress or something, it really depends. So we can't say they should or shouldn't, or they should or should not read in certain situations. That's why we'll do that. We can talk about that later, though.
Yeah, and for those who, if I don't get a chance because time is running out, we are going to have that private breakout so you can get your questions, answers. And then real quick about knowing your rights, in your package, you have insert that you can put into your wallets from the ACLU of what you can do when you get stopped. We also have information if you have a record, how you get your records expunged, so you can now once again participate in the political process. And for those who are watching us by Praise Vision and through our streaming ministry, you can download that from our website.
Hi, my question is regarding public defenders. I had to do a project, a research project that caused me to research public defenders in New York, and they were having an issue where the public defenders were overworked, there weren't enough, and so people were just being sentenced and they had to stay in jail for long periods of time because they didn't have a public defender or a reliable public defender to defend them. What is that situation like here in Georgia? Are the public defenders reliable? Are they overworked? And are they diverse? Because that was another issue. They didn't have enough diverse public defenders. They were a bunch of Caucasian defenders that didn't know the situation of the person that they were representing, or they already had some kind of mindset of who that person was, so they didn't really give it their all to defend them.
So, Joy?
I mean, and I say this because that's what I do now. And you know, because you interned with me for it. The first 10 years of my practice was private practice, and I was like doing domestic and criminal, and was actually going to move away from law, period. And it was someone, and they was, the law changes, well, not the law, but the situation changes, trying to get more counties to have adequate representation and move into the public defender thing. When I did it, it was like somebody saying, we need some people with some experience, because one of the negative was most people were graduating from law school and being public defender and did not know the law. And I know what my caseload is at any given time. My caseload right now is 421 clients that I represent, 421. Now, to me, I'm not overworked with it because I know what I'm doing. I know how to look at a case. I know how to analyze a case. I go and talk to my clients, and I know the facts of the case. But that really depends on the individual. That could be somebody that has 100 and something. They really feel that they're overloaded or anything like that. So you can say that, but it depends on the attorney. Is he or she know how to prepare a case, talk to the clients? Because one of the things, the negative is that is a lot of times clients would say, I don't want a public defender because you're working for the state, and everybody's not like that. We're just trying to make sure people's rights are protected.
So, Joy, real quick, 20-second soundbite, please.
Wonderful. The public defender system here in Georgia is very diverse, and most of the public defenders that consistently look like the folk that they are defending in the metropolitan area. That's not like that in unpopulated southern counties and those kinds of things. But and just like you can get a bad private attorney, you can get a bad public defender. I think the caseload is related to what kind of work that you're giving and how experienced you are, because someone like Willie Davis, who's been practicing for almost 20 years, is going to have a more significant caseload, but he's going to be able to handle that. When I was in the City Court of Atlanta and did a lot of DUI cases, my caseload was probably 400 for the month. And so I saw all those kinds of cases, but you're able to identify and weed out, go to trial, and the ones that we need to figure out what an alternative to jail would be and those kinds of things.
Natalie.
I have a question from somebody who's watching online. What are the levels of engagement that police officers possess to deal with an escalating situation, and what are the criteria for engaging at those different levels? Example, when do you go from using a baton or a flashlight to taser to a lethal weapon?
That's a good question. Like I said before, there's an escalating ladder of force. And when we use asbatons, usually after a person is combative as far as throwing punches or kicking or resisting arrest, that's just one option that that officer can use, is the baton. If a person, say for instance, is not, he's outside of a vehicle, and we're telling that person, and he's under arrest, and we're telling that person to get on the ground, and he's refusing to get on the ground, or he's trying to flee or escape, then that officer can use his taser, the individual. So those are just two of the examples as far as escalating force.
All right, thank you.
Yes, I'm asking this as a concerned parent of a 22-year-old. They now have an app called DWB, and I want to know if you guys are familiar with that and if you think it would be a good idea to download it.
Can you?
DWB, Driving While Black. It's a new app.
Anybody on the panel? No.
I don't understand. What's the question, Sister Riley? You're just trying to confuse
do you
somebody.
think it's No, Mr. Davis, I'm not. Do you think it's a good idea? I mean, do you think it would be helpful?
What does the app do?
There are a lot of things. You can call, for instance, say, for instance, if you're stopped, it will call somebody. You can call somebody and let them know that you're being stopped. And there are a couple other things that the app does. So I just didn't know if you guys were familiar with the app. It's new.
Yeah, no one seems to be familiar with it.
No, just get in a lighted place. Don't be in the dark.
They can consult that handout that you'll find on the website from the ACLU about what you do when you get stopped.
Good evening, everybody. I spent 16 years in the Army as a military police. I'm SRT certified, which is MP for SWAT, so I'm very familiar with the rules of engagement. I think that from my observation, we're missing a very important point. We talk about how we need to teach our young black men to respect police officers. That has not always worked. For example, with the young man in Cleveland, Ohio, Tamir Rice, he didn't have a chance to show any kind of disrespect at all when he was shot in less than 2 seconds flat. The police officer put 3 lies in his report. He said that Tamir was at the bench with more people. That was a lie. He said that he told him to drop his weapon. That was a lie also. And he said he reached in his side for his weapon. The video proved that all 3 of those were lies, okay? And in the streets. To keep my comments brief, I think the police have to be taught that they have to respect the lives of our young black men, and if they're not, they need to be held accountable. I think this is a race issue. In Pennsylvania, there was a lady cop that shot a man dead, a white man dead, and within a month, she was charged with criminal homicide. She tased the guy. He was, frozen from the taser, and then she shot him twice in the back. She said she feared for her life.
10 seconds, I'm sorry, because we have all these folks and I still got to make a point.
She was charged with criminal homicide, okay? Now, had she been white, had the guy been black, then she probably would have been justifiable homicide. But, that's my comment. I had more stuff to say. I want to talk about Correctional Corporation of America, that the private prison industry is, they lobby Congress for longer prison sentences, and you have several companies that are doing their manufacturing in the prisons. For example, you have food supply companies, clothing companies like Victoria's Secrets, and technology companies. They are moving their manufacturing into the prisons. And people like, for example, Michael Jordan himself is investing money in private prisons.
Thank you for your comment.
Isaac,
And then I want to make
let me just say, and I know
And
because
we have like 2 minutes
right, but
left,
let me just say this because I think Deja said is that she was concerned every day about her father coming home with a police officer. In my job, I have to jump on a police officer to represent. And I say this because it is far too many young black guys walking the streets with guns. I mean, you have a gun on you. An officer, you're placed in a situation, does this young black guy have a weapon on him? And when you make a movement, you don't know, but the part of the problem is not so much just race, but it's too many of our young kids walking the streets with guns. I've had 2 murder cases. One where a 15 or 16-year-old takes a gun to school, somebody ends up dead. Somebody gives a person a gun. Where I have a client right now, and I told her she was lucky. She shot her boyfriend in the foot because he was with somebody, and I'm saying it could have been worse than that. But part of the problem is just too many of our young people with
Sorry
guns
to
in
cut
the
you off,
streets.
Willie. We gotta quickly move in and out very fast.
Real quick, I'll make it
just
real. I'll make this real quick. You got to understand the psychology of this whole thing. I think people, always say race, and I'm not saying that's not the case. What I'm saying is I know that the Klan does not like me. So if I know that the Klan doesn't like me, I'm not going to go to a rally and try to be next to them and warm up by the fire. We know that we are already suspect. You put a gun in your hand, that's almost automatic. So what we have to do is we have to teach our kids from home, hey man, when you go out of this door, you have to make sure X, Y, and Z. Did this kid deserve to die? I'm not saying that. I'm saying there has to be some education from home, not to set yourself up for failure.
Thank you. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we're going to break out. And I want 2 people to make a quick comment, and that's going to be Major Walker, that I think has a very important point.
Hi, my name is Tina Ison Pegram. My question was, I had an officer come to my home because my son was playing the music, I guess a little bit too loud, and he must have told him to turn it down or whatever, but the officer asked him, let me see your driver's license. And my son was like, I'm only 15. So I wasn't home, so I don't know what to say or how should I have reacted to that.
Now, let me get this clear. Was he in a vehicle or was he not in a vehicle?
Home.
He was at home, and the officer asked him for some identification. How old does your son look? Let me see.
Stand up.
Okay. 17, 18 years old?
He's 15.
I know, but he looks like it. That's what I'm saying. But usually when officers come, say for instance, if it's or there's a crime that has occurred, or he gets a 911 call to that location, that's the first thing they're going to do, because if he has to generate a report, he's going to need that information, and he wants to make sure that information is accurate. Now, say for instance, if he did not, and he explained to the officer, hey, I don't have a driver's license, but this is my name, the officer should just go ahead and put that on the report. But say for instance, you have a problem with it, then the only thing you need to do is call a supervisor back out to the scene and speak to the supervisor about the officer's conduct, or if you have a question about what he did.
Thank you. Sophie, and then I'm going to have Major Walker make a point that we talked about.
My name is Sophia Barrett. My husband and I are photographers, so a lot of times, well, sometimes, not a lot of times, we'll have some clients and we'll go to some places like an abandoned building or something to capture images that are a little more artistic, more rough, to give that contrast. And we were approached by a young officer. He was Caucasian. He must have been no older than 30, who immediately came out with his gun drawn and started walking towards us. So my first reaction was to ask him why his gun was even drawn. Because literally, we had 2 clients, they were dressed up, and Derek and I have cameras in our hands, and it's clear that we're taking pictures. His response was, because there's 4 of you and there's 1 of me. So what should we have done in that situation? Because, I mean, we complied, we didn't get upset, we were very concerned about why, but other than you know, we could have gotten his information and called, but in that situation, what do? If somebody walks up to you with this gun drawn on you?
When an officer approaches you, say for instance in your situation, you're at abandoned property, and a lot of our calls do come from abandoned properties. I oversee an area called English Avenue, Vine City, and out there's probably 60 to 70% of vacant properties. And my officers have the task of going to those vacant properties and checking them. And the reason why we check them because crimes are being committed inside those vacant properties. So once we go there, 7 out of 10 times we find individuals in there. Sometimes we're threatened, sometimes we have been shot at from vacant properties. And it creates a sense of apprehension or fear with that officer. Now, for him to come to that scene and he saw that you had the cameras and then there was 4 of you, yeah, he was outnumbered. He may have been afraid. But our policy does not dictate that he pulls his weapon out and pointed at you. Now, what you should have done, once the situation had been resolved, then I would have got on the phone and called 911 again and had a supervisor to come out there and you speak to that supervisor about that issue.
So should we have asked for his badge number?
You should have asked for his badge number, his name, what precinct he worked at, because we have several different units operating in several different areas, and his supervisor's name as well.
And then that next step would have been that the supervisor, and then what happened with you was unfortunate and traumatic, and you know, nobody ever wants to have somebody walk up with a gun on them, but they could have taken that as a learning experience for him to say, this is your career, this is inappropriate behavior, whereas now maybe it hasn't been checked. So it would have been an opportunity for that behavior to be checked so that he would not have done that. It also would have gone in his IA file, possibly, and so that if there's a pattern of that behavior, we all, defense attorneys, prosecutors, we could get copies of those internal affairs files, of their personnel files, and if you know you have an officer that has a reputation for being excessive or not doing what he's supposed to, then that hurts us as the prosecution. We have a hard time putting them up as witnesses, and the defense has a field day with them. So that's just something part of the process of weeding out the bad apples, not to say that he was, but just as a general idea of us making sure that we have officers that are fit to do the job.
Is there a way that we can follow up to?
Probably if you call 911 dispatch, call the non-emergency number, let them know the date, the incident location, and then work from that way back.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to have us close on with a comment from Major Walker based on a conversation that we had. And then lastly, I have a questionnaire. I ask you to fill it out if you think that this has been a blessing to you, if you think the information is helpful, if you want to do it again, or some other topics that we missed, anything to improve, this is for you.
First of all, let me say good evening to you. My name is Horace Walker. I'm a retired major from the Atlanta Police Department. I spent about 38 years there, and I probably worked about every major unit in the police department. I was commander of homicide, narcotics, SWAT, name it, I did it. But I was talking to Mr. Delamar about 2 observations that I made over the years. Well, actually one, but I'm going to throw in another one. You know, words are very powerful. And in the process of raising our kids, we say a lot of things to them. And one of the things that I observed back in the 70s was something that I don't think a lot of you think about. I was probably the first black supervisor to work in the Buckhead area. And I was patrolling down Roswell Road, and a lady came out and waved a hand to flag me down in my police car. And situation. So I got out of the car and I was ready for anything, and she came up and she brought a little boy. And she said, I want to introduce you to my son. And she looked at her son and said, this is a police officer. He's here to help you. If you get in trouble, go to him because he will help you. And the little boy shook my hand. And it was kind of an odd experience for me because I'd never worked in Buckhead before as a police officer. The other side of the zone at that time was Zone 1, which is this side of town. Typically what happened is I would get flagged down, usually by a mother, black female, and she would call her kid over, and she would look at him and say, if you don't act right, he's going to take you away. It happens in schools. Teachers will call a kid over and say, if you don't stop acting bad, he's going to take you away. So what I want to do is ask you to think about something. Do you actually set the stage for some of the things that happen to our black males and females? There were situations where we would drive up on a bunch of black kids, and when you drove up, they saw the police car, they'd take off running. Well, back in the old days, we would run, and we would catch them. And when you stopped them and asked them, well, why were you running? They would merely look at you and say, I don't know. Could it have been because of what they had been told about police officers? The second thing is, for years, I've had a pet peeve. Most of you have bought video games for your kids. Your money buys the video games, but have you ever really stopped to look to see what those video games are all about? When I ran homicide, we'd have kids to commit a murder, and we'd bring them in the office. It's like, what did I do? It was as if they almost believed that the person they killed would hop up, spring back to life, and that would be the end of it. When they finally realized that they had taken a life and that person was not coming back, they broke down. But what I suggest to you is you might want to look at some of those games because of or shoot, kill, chop. Some of the games, I think if you knew what they were about, you wouldn't purchase them. But from a psychological standpoint, I think Terry can probably back me up on this. If you sit down and your conflict resolution, if your conflict resolution skills you learn from a video game, then the answer to the question when you become angry is you shoot, stab, or cut up that person. So what I want you to think about is, are you seeing the results now of training that we, the parents, have provided our kids with for years and years?
Thank you. Thank you. So look, and I'm encouraged, thank you. I just got word that people still are very amped up about what we're talking about and would like it to go a little bit longer. But I'm going to ask my panelists, I want to be respectful of their time, if they would be open to going another 10 minutes to have this discussion but still have the breakout. I just want to be respectful of people's time. So, panel, are you open for another 10 minutes?
No pressure.
No pressure. All right. So the panel is still open for another 10 minutes. So if you have questions, let me be respectful of the individuals who had those pending questions that I kind of waved off. I'm going to deal with them first. Young man.
How you doing? I'm a 20-year-old young black man. Just had a couple of questions of my own. Wanted to know, there was a few questions back about an officer searching your car. In that type of a situation, is it okay for the citizen to ask why their car is being searched? Like, understanding that an officer might see something, but let's just say you know there's nothing in your car. Is it okay for you to ask the officer why he's searching your car? Number two, if I feel as though I'm being racially profiled by an officer and he's trying to gauge me, how would I handle that situation? And number three, because of the shortage in officers nowadays, are officers still being trained thoroughly to the point where I understand them and they have fear, but in a lot of these situations, the officer always says, I was scared, and they always pull the gun first. Are they still being trained to the point where they're not supposed to pull the gun first because of fear?
I'll answer the search question. I'll defer the rest. For the search, you don't have to agree to a search. The officer can ask, may I search your car? And if you say no, then they cannot search your car without a search warrant. So if you know there's nothing in your car, that you haven't done anything wrong, I mean, an officer can ask. They get asked all the time. And ironically enough, sometimes people will say, yeah, sure, search it, and they have a bunch of illegal stuff in there. But you do have the right to say, no, you can't search, and if they then have to establish to get a search warrant to come and search your car.
The other piece of information that you need to know is that they can arrest you for anything they see in plain view. And you're responsible for anything if you're the passenger or the driver that's within your reach. So that's important to note. So if you have a gun on the windshield, that's good. If you have a gun underneath the seat, that's not.
And for the question of training, officers are mandated every year to go through 24 hours of training, as well as elective training. So say, for instance, if an officer wants to go to training in Forsyth, Georgia on stress management, how to handle stressful situations, then they can go. But every year we're trained, and it's trained on top of training on top of training. And those are some of the situations and some of the problems that we address in our training. We want to make sure we're up to date with their training and make sure they're current. One of the things that I encourage my officers, and like I said, I have about 160 of them, I encourage them to always go to training and make sure the training is relative to the job that they're doing. So I have those officers who go for, say for instance, how to pull a vehicle over, use of force, de-escalating situations, as just an example. But we encourage our officers to go to training all the time, and as well as being mandated to do so as well.
Thank you.
Hold on a second. His question 2, I don't think got answered.
Yeah, the question about if I feel as though I'm being racially profiled, and the officer's trying to gauge me in order to give me the, how would I handle that situation?
Same thing to report to the supervisor from a technical aspect, that's what you want to do. And as you can see, cameras are rampant. I mean, that's how all the videos that we see now. You can legally record a situation that's going on. An officer may ask that you stop recording, and under most circumstances, you have a right to record the situation that's going on, specifically in Georgia, because Georgia is without getting too legal, a one-party consent state. And if you are the private citizen, then you have more of a right to record the situation that's going on. So document and report, again, is the best thing that you can do.
I did want to address that. And that sounds, a lot of what we're saying here sounds good because we're in this forum, but when you're out on the street, it's different. You said, how do you know, if you feel you're being racially profiled? I don't know how you feel that. I mean, it would just be based on, okay, this officer, a lot of people automatically think that, okay, white officer, black person, I'm being racially profiled. In my county, where I live, which is Gwinnett, I was outside of my office one night, and I was bringing in some materials, but I was actually in the car talking about the Mike Brown situation, and I pulled up, still had my seatbelt on, and turned my lights out, and I was in the parking lot of my office. Cop behind me, he's on the street, and I'm like, okay, he's running my tags. And then, he got out of his car, and I said, well, let me go ahead and get my stuff ready because I know the routine. Not because I'm a criminal, but I know the routine. So, I let down my window and I said, yeah, can I help you? And he said, license, registration. And I said, he said, do you have ID? And I said, sure I do. Can I, help you? And he said, let me see your ID. And I said, okay, well, my name is Terry Parks. I'm up there on the marquee. I'm outside of, in my office while I'm getting my stuff. And when I looked up, there were 2 unmarked silver Chargers that had me blocked in. I didn't even see them come. They didn't turn on their lights, anything. They're just in the dark. Now, this is right on the heels of the Mike Brown situation. So I'm sitting here and I'm just like giving this guy, I hear him running my name, the whole 9 or whatever. And so he comes back to the car and, now automatic, this is a young guy and his head was shaved bald. And I'm like, okay, I could easily attach that to skinheads. And I'm gonna try to, say this quickly, but when he came back, he handed me my stuff. I said, so am I who I say I am? Is everything? And then he said, yeah, you could be somebody, you could be somebody breaking into your own office. I didn't understand that. And I was like, I could be somebody else breaking into my own office. Okay, and so I said, all right, well, and then he said to me just like this. He said to me just like this. you ought to be thankful. And I thought about it, and I could have engaged him in a whole psychological game. And then I looked at him and he said, you ought to be thankful. He said it again with the whole head shake and everything. And at that moment, my whole life flashed before my eyes. And I remember telling my wife, I'll be right back. The last thing I told her, I'll be right back. And at that moment I said, you know what, officer, you're right. Good job. Way to keep the community safe. That's what my tax dollars go for. Have a good night. You have to understand, I'm not tatted all up. You know, my pants aren't sagging. I'm sitting here in front of my office. It doesn't matter. I can't give reason to. Comply does not mean you weak, doesn't mean you soft. It's, I'm trying to make it home.
Where you from, Terry?
Where am I from?
No, where you from originally?
Detroit.
All right. So,
Isaiah.
Sister Coleman, because I know I owe
Isaiah,
you.
I just wanted to, with Penn on the question he asked about, with respect to his car being searched, I would like to ask you guys that one. And he said, well, you know, do I have to do that? And your answer was, well, no, you can say no. What's the most likely outcome of that? If he says no to the officer, and the officer says, may I search your car? What can he expect that might happen after that? Because, again, now Terry, we all know Terry. Terry can, you know, kind of mouth off. But Terry cooled you down that time. Our responses can determine a different outcome. What's the most likely thing that would probably happen to this young 20-year-old African-American male if he tells the officer, no, you can't search my car? Is he going to, okay, have a nice day?
No, he'll probably be detained till the drug-sniffing dogs come out and then clear him.
Exactly, and that's my point. As young people, you have to understand, if you haven't done anything wrong, maybe in order to expedite what you're trying to do and you don't have anything in your car, yes, sir, you can search my car. Now, if you want to be technically right and you want to invoke your rights and say no, expect a different outcome.
And the sad side, what happens with that is that you get an attitude and you want to cuss at the office, you want to talk back. So now, in situation that you should have just waited a moment, been patient, walk away from, now you're going to get handcuffed because an officer is going to say obstruction and disobedience. So sometimes you just make something that should just be, like Terry said, if Terry had gotten into an argument, and then he's going to get a citation for disobedient conduct, it's not major, but he's not going to be home for a few hours.
We have.
I'm not of the mind that you should give up your rights for expediency. If you say no, officer, you cannot just calmly say no, you can't search my car. He's going to go to the next step. But then you have the right to report him because he had no probable cause or saw nothing, there was nothing, and then they can do the retraining. It's going to stay a couple of minutes of your time, but you would be surprised when you say, officers, you can search my car, and you loaned your car to your roommate, and your roommate smoked a blunt, and then the blunt's found in the car, charged with possession of marijuana, and you didn't know it was in there, or you borrowed your roommate's car because you didn't have one, and you say, officer, I don't have anything, this is not my car, and you consented because it's not your car, and then you find something that's not yours, then no. I'm not one of those people that believe that you relinquish your rights. One of the things that I tell folk that happen to, drink and then get caught drinking and driving allegedly, that when they say, come out and let's do some voluntary field sobriety tests, the word is voluntary. No, sir, I'm not doing anything voluntarily. The next step is to take you down, give you a breathalyzer, and if it comes back below the limit, then you're free to go. But now you've done all this kind of stuff, and then you're angry, and then you're doing all these kinds of stuff, and then they arrest you for driving on the influence. So I'm not one of those people that say, allow the officer to search your car? Because sometimes you don't know what's going on if you have, a communal house.
So we're going to only entertain 2 more questions because I want to be respectful. I have my person who's going to be registering people to vote. He has to leave, so I want to be respectful of his time. So 2 more questions, and then we're going to break out, and you can ask questions downstairs.
Okay, so the last few minutes of the panel have been proving, or will lend some credence to what I'm about to ask. We understand we need police officers, we need them in our society, but are there any realistic solutions when the society does not trust the police officers for legitimate reasons, for things like mentioned earlier, a young lady taking photographs with her husband and a gun is drawn on her? How do you really deal with those things? I understand training needs to take place for police officers. I understand that we need to train our children better, so there's not one solution that's going to solve the problem. It's a double approach, right? And so the same police officers, as the former major mentioned, the same kids that are playing video games killing each other, solution to problems. Police officers today are also trained because they're a part of that generation, also playing those very same video games. So they have a tendency to escalate things beyond what it may have been 20, 30, or even 40 years ago. So are there any realistic solutions? I understand we can do training and we can say training and it sounds nice, but are there legitimate solutions when the community does not trust the very people charged with protecting them?
I think the simplest way is that you have to develop those relationships, although that may not be a simple solution, but I think that number one, I think we have a big issue going both ways with dehumanizing each other. We see each other as a threat rather than a person. And I think that once you know the individual, once you are able to personify instead of objectify a person, then at that point you're breaking down those walls and that mistrust both ways, because it goes both ways. Everybody's in survival mode, right? And so I think that that's one of the biggest issues, is that instead of the second the officer walks into the room, you already have this perception of, oh, he's just coming after me, walk up and introduce yourself. Or vice versa. When the officer walks into the room, instead of, elevating the situation, agitating the situation, introduce yourself to the people who are in the room. I think one of the best things that happened is the YouTube video that went viral. The white officer who was doing, I can't remember what the dance was now, whichever one on the street with like 4 or 5 other lay people, was what we call like citizens. You know what I mean? So it's simple stuff like that. It's not, formal introductions like we have here. It's just social settings. Get to know. Go walk into your precinct and say, hey, I want to introduce myself. What can I do to make my community better? Just different things like that.
Just to respond, can I just respond to that? That's great, and I think that goes back to asking the victims to then play the role of going to the police officer. And I'm saying victim, I'm using that loosely, but are there systems in place where police officers are actually now going into communities, not in an angry manner, to develop those relationships? You can't ask the victims to then go and be friends with the police officers that they fear because they believe that, whether it's legitimate or not. But asking the citizens to then go to the people they feel who are oppressing them, I think is counterproductive. It can be helpful, but are there programs in place to ask police officers to do the same?
I need a quick yes or no, and what is the program?
Absolutely,
and then we got to go to the last question and
plenty
close
of
out.
different programs out there, but you got to show up to the programs, number one. And number two, I don't think that the formal programs are the best solution. I think it's the one-on-one interaction and socialization that breaks down those walls. And like I said, it needs to go both ways. It needs to be the officer breaking the ice, and it needs to be the individuals breaking the ice. I think it has to go both ways.
Thank you. And the last one, Sister Cleveland.
My name is Betty Cleveland, and I want to thank the panelists for being here today and for helping us to better understand what our rights are. I have a quick question. A friend of mine was recently stopped by a police officer for speeding. And in the process of being stopped for speeding, the officer realized that there was a warrant out for her arrest. And it dated back to a ticket for $15 that she'd already taken care of, but she was still taken to jail and consequently spent 2 days in jail. And as a result of that, as she's looking for a job now, continues to come up in her background check. She did have a receipt for where she did pay the ticket. Courts or the system had not made that correction. My question is, how would a young person who's driving, who perhaps might get a ticket that they would conveniently hide from their parents or neglect to pay, an adult who got really busy and forgot to pay a ticket, find out if there is a warrant out for their arrest? Because you can be driving around innocently not even knowing that.
Okay, I can answer that question because I was a traffic court judge. You can register at the Department of Driver Services and have your license checked to see if it's valid. 9 times out of 10, if you have failed to pay a speeding ticket or whatever traffic ticket, your license is going to first be put on an FTA and they're going to suspend it. If it's suspended, then there's more than likely a warrant someplace for it. And they can tell you where it's suspended, and so that you can go to the courts and get the warrant lifted.
But her license weren't suspended. That's just it. She had no idea that there was a warrant out.
We can do that offline.
Yeah.
So do you go to
For
the
time.
police department and ask, or do you go to the driver's license
You can run
bureau?
your history anytime you want to, but there's a fee on that, and that's counterproductive. That was a glitch in the system, and it's not supposed to work that way.
So on that note, we're going to close. And I want to thank you all. You've been a great audience. Give yourself a round of applause. And I want to thank our panelists. Can you give them a round of applause if you will stand? Our panelists, thank you. And our special invited guests. And we're going to have our pastor close us out in prayer, then we'll take a picture, and then we'll go downstairs for the breakout.
Let's give Attorney Delamar a round of applause for putting this together. Shall we all stand for prayer tonight? Father, the things that we have is just clear again that we very much live in a sinful world. But God, tonight, Lord, there has been an attempt to put a practical application on all of this to make sure the relationships between those that serve the community and those who live in the community is a healthy one. And Lord, we take away the best tonight. And I just pray that, and we pray, God, that the way that we live is always above reproach. And when we encounter those things that are unfair, God, our prayer is that you will always allow justice to rule. Even if it doesn't come across that a moment, ultimately, justice will rule. But Father, our prayer, ultimately, as individuals, that we live in such a way at all times that our lives are above reproach. Thank you for each panelist this evening, them sharing their experiences, their journey, their expertise. Our guests tonight, each participant, each questioner, everyone here tonight, God. We believe that you have been given our best tonight, and you have blessed this gathering. Thank you for Attorney Delamar of driving this along with his team. For our prayers in Jesus' name, amen.
We're going to ask the special invited guests to join the panelists on stage for a quick picture. Also, we're passing out surveys to get your feedback on this forum so that as we go forward and we do more forums like this, we can get your feedback. If you could please fill that out and leave it either downstairs or